Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
And I'm Steven, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, it's MSP 1122. Do you know where your children are? Are they in the shadow of a crane? In the friendly neighborhood of a Spider-Man? Behind the bike stands? Stand still, laddie! If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding. But the real treat isn't the sweets, it's the pop culture fun we had along the way. So whether in black, in the high life, in the USSR, or baby got it, the Major Spoilers podcast is back. And it's on the air.
Welcome to issue 1122, the Major Spoilers podcast. Hey, Matthew's favorite time of the year is coming up this weekend.
Wonderful time.
WrestleMania 41. 41 years of WrestleMania, Matthew. Have you watched every single episode of WrestleMania?
I have been really out of WWE mainstream since the debut of AEW 4 or 5 years ago. Because a couple of my rave top guys ended up at AEW, which is the new competitor joint. But I'm interested in this year's WrestleMania because they're bringing back The Rock, who is like 49.
A bad guy now.
Yeah, well, he's been a bad guy multiple times. And then
Christian
John
Church.
Cena. Yeah, Hayden Christian
sorry.
Church.
Yeah, John Cena, sorry.
Yeah, different guy.
They
John
look the same.
Cena.
Just take John Cena and say, "Yo, bro, don't work out. Skip your creatine." And in 6 months, they would look exactly alike.
Like Thomas Hayden Church.
Yes,
Sandman.
exactly. They would look exactly alike.
They sound a little alike too. But yeah, John Cena is back, and for the first time in forever, he has turned heel, which is interesting, but also smacks of.
But he's been like mind washed, right? Hasn't The Rock put a whammy on him?
I'm not even sure anymore.
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
The whammy. You gotta be careful.
I'm sure he put a whammy on him.
The whammy.
Yep.
I'll have to look into that. The whammy. It's probably.
I mean, you could use other words, but other people would say you're being racist and stop it. That's what they would say.
I'm trying to think. It's like John Mulaney was talking about how he was using the M word in a sketch about little people.
I put a thing in the chat for you to look at. That's a word you're not supposed to. That's a phrase you're not supposed to use anymore.
Oh. Wow, I never do that. That's just rude. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Never do that.
Yeah, so see? So, put a whammy on it.
Yeah. The whammy.
Nope, I'm serious. I'm looking at pictures of Hayden Christian Church and John Cena side by side. And seriously, Thomas Hayden Church as the Sandman is almost a dead ringer for John Cena. Hayden
Christensen played young Anakin.
Well, I'm also looking at that picture side by side as well. It's Anakin, the Sandman, and Peacemaker all in a picture together, and I could see them trying to make a comparison between Thomas Hayden Church and John Cena, but I don't know why they keep putting pictures of Anakin in this Google. Google sucks. Google as a search engine doesn't work anymore. If you type in Thomas Hayden Church and John Cena, and it's spitting out pictures of Star Wars, you know your search engine no longer works. But WrestleMania is this weekend, and we've got a wrestling comic book that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. I will let people argue. Actually, we talk about Spider-Man 3 with the Sandman and the death of Uncle Ben in the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show. And if people want to listen to the Major Spoilers podcast pre-show, all they need to do is point their browser to patreon.com/Major Spoilers. And if you want to get into an argument on the internet, boy, just go to the internet. That's where you find arguments these days, because the internet is just full of people that want to argue with you. If you want to have an informed, logical conversation about how John Cena looks like Thomas Hayden Church, then you want to also go over to our Discord server There's a link in the show notes because there's a long URL that I have to spell out, and you're never going to remember it because you're not going to get to your pencil and your pen on time and to find a piece of paper and put on your shoes and run downstairs and get in front of the computer so you can type it in. There's a link in the show notes. Just click on that. It'll take you to the Discord page. And you can join it for free. In this economy? Yes, in this economy. You can join it for free, and you can jump into the comic book chat or the Major Spoilers podcast chat, and you can say, yeah, Steven's right. Thomas Hayden Church and Hayden Christensen look nothing alike. But Thomas Hayden Church and John Cena look absolutely like they were separated at birth. Find out more and have fun over on our Discord server.
Yeah, it's like Jake Gyllenhaal and the youngest son from Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah. But before we get to our Wrestle comic book, which I forgot to mention earlier, it's I Heart Skull Crusher.
Oh, yeah.
First, we have to do some regular comic book reviews.
Yeah, we do.
So what do you got, Matthew?
It's the first appearance of Spider-Man.
I am so glad that Spider-Man is finally getting his own comic book. After all of these years, after 75 years of Marvel Comics, Spider-Man is finally getting his own comic in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man #1. Congratulations, Marvel. Took you long enough.
Well done, Spidey. He finally did, get his own book. And it's interesting to see the cover of this particular book, written by Joe Kelly, art by Pepe Larraz, and the cover features like 16 bad
guys.
A lot.
Yeah.
But something important you need to know about those 16 bad guys is that virtually all of them have ties to a version of the Secret Six. The Sinister Six. Could it be? Could it?
I think the story arc, isn't this story arc called the Sinister 16?
I believe it is, yes. But nonetheless, this issue begins with what feels like maybe an almost too shop-worn moment of Peter Parker, once again unemployed, because he had recently worked for Norman Osborn, looking for a new job and failing miserable. And so he has nothing that he can do. He's wandering around the universe, and it actually is kind of entertaining, and it plays into the silly, that Parker luck thing, but it kind of gives a little wink to it in that maybe the Parker luck is Parker luck, and maybe the Parker luck is Peter splitting his attention so much that he doesn't actually give anything enough time or energy to try and figure things out. But nonetheless, we do see him, with Aunt May, which is lovely. Aunt May, of course, is now an adult. She is no longer his frail aunt hanging around the house making wheat cakes. She is the CEO of Feast. She's taking care of the people of New York City who might need help, who might need shelter. And she's doing really, really well, even though all three of her bosses turned out to be people who wanted to put on a costume and beat up her nephew.
Oh, man. Where has Aunt May working with the unhoused? Was that an Ultimate Spider-Man story? Was that in the video game, or was that
It was in the video game.
Yeah, I remember it was in the video game.
After Mr. Negative showed up in the comics, Mr. Negative, Martin Lee, hired her in the comics in not quite the One More Day era, but in and around that time, around the 600s. And then, the Spider-Man, PS4 Spider-Man had that as a major plot point. I want to say...
I thought it was in Ultimate Spider-Man, too. I thought Aunt May was doing volunteer work there as well.
Might have been. I didn't read that. What did Aunt May do when she was, my cousin Vinny's girlfriend, when she was Marisa Tomei?
Oh, she didn't do anything that we really learned about. Oh, I mean, she did. Yes. In the second movie, European Vacation, Iron Man, what's his name? Yes, Chef is delivering a check to the shelter that Aunt May helped raise the money for.
Got it. Yeah.
And
that
he's
makes
flirting
sense.
with her, and he's very nervous because, oh man, he really has a thing for Aunt May, which, you know, if Happy is happy about Aunt May, you know they're going to kill her in the third movie. Spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah. And I want to say in the third movie, she was working at the shelter because that's where the Earth Toby, Norman Osborn, ended up after he gave up his Green Goblin
Yeah.
suit.
I just was trying to figure
And
out when the first appearance of her working for the homeless shelter was.
Like 2006, I want to say, in that neighborhood.
All right.
But she's still doing there. And, of course, Peter gets a job, not because he's good at it, but because he got a recommendation from somebody he used to go to school with. So now he's going to be the supervising engineer of cooperative disciplines at Rand Enterprises.
Oh, no way that can go wrong.
Yeah, to which Aunt May responds, "That sounds made up." And it does. However, I think Rand Enterprises is still owned by Iron Fist, isn't it?
I thought it was bought out. Again, this is TV series stuff, but I also thought it was in the comic books. But again, we're looking at multiple reboots and at least a universe reset. I thought that AIM had bought out Rand Industries and was using the good graces of the Rand as the cover story for them to do their evil stuff in the sub-basement.
I think that's just in the TV show, although
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you, it could be anywhere. Never mind. I don't
Also,
know.
if you want to see, if you want to see how bad Google searches become, the question is, does AIM own Rand Industries? No. Ayn Rand, the author of novels like Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, did not own the Rand Corporation.
I just
see, ladies and gentlemen, what happens when I am in a foul mood and all these things are happening in the world around us, and someone just comes up and says, "Hey, a little minor subplot in The Amazing Spider-Man #1 has Aunt May working for a food kitchen," and suddenly Ayn Rand is not an owner of the Rand Corporation.
Correct. So,
frickin' AI search engines.
Peter's first day is interrupted by a problem.
Uh-oh.
And that problem is called the Rhino. Now,
is this the Paul Giamatti Rhino, or is this a different Rhino?
This is a Russian Rhino. This is not like the Paul Giamatti Rhino. I'm pretty sure Rhino was retconned away.
Yeah.
He lived on Earth, Andrew Garfield. So
that Earth still exists. We saw that in the third movie.
Does it?
It does. I actually like Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, and I think a lot of people woke up after the No Way Home or whatever the third movie was, that Andrew Garfield actually does play a very good Spider-Man, and I think some people wouldn't mind seeing him return. Now, Tobey Maguire, I don't know if he would be interested in returning. I don't even know if Andrew Garfield would be interested in returning. But I think after his performance in that, a lot more people are like, he wasn't such a bad Spider-Man.
Yeah. I feel like they both really showed up for that, and they did some really cool stuff with it. But none of that's in this story. This story does, however, have one of Spider-Man's big baddies who has been disappearing for a while, who's been out of the picture for, the better part of 5 or 6 years. He shall remain nameless, but he's out there, and he's scary, and he's orange, and he's green. We do see Peter on a date.
Doug Hobgoblin.
Shut up.
Doug H. Goblin.
Peter goes out on a date with his new girlfriend, Shay. I don't know anything about Shay, but she's there. She does a thing. Something dark side. But throughout the issue, I keep saying to myself, this really feels like it's going fast for a big double-sized issue. And I get to the climactic last scene. It's like, dun, 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 something happened. But then the story keeps going. There is, in fact, a second story, also written by Joe Kelly with art by John Romita Jr. You know John Romita Jr., classic Spider-Man guy.
Yeah.
He was writing Spider-Man when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I was 12 years old. Well, he wasn't writing it. He was drawing it. But apparently, this issue is the beginning of sort of a new split format. And essentially, according to the back matter in the issue, what they're doing is they're going to make sure that the comic gets out and that it gets on time, because they're going to have Joe writing 2 different stories for 2 different artists. So Pepe Larraz just came off of Blood Hunt, where all of the vampires in the world went boogity, boogity, boogity. And now John Romita Jr. is back. So you're going to have 2 different stories. The second story focuses on Norman Osborn, who is no longer an evil, crazy, mad goblin guy. He's just trying to get his life back together and being like, hey, I sure am glad that I'm here today. Yep, I sure am. So if you say to me, what's this book about? It's about 48 pages long, but more importantly, it really does hit on a lot of what I feel like are key Spider-Man moments. And it plays with some of these bits and pieces in ways that I like. I like the fact that they make fun of that old Parker Luck, the crazy nonsense. I like the fact that they have Aunt May, they have Randy Robinson, they have a number of the supporting cast members coming back into the game. And we have kind of a new character who is retconned into Peter's life as having been an old friend in high school. But he's an old friend that Peter remembers well, and Aunt May remembers less pleasantly. So there's some story.
And soon we'll take on the guise of a name that we can't say. Maybe we should hush about the name of the villain he will become. Remember in Hush, where he's just like, hey, here's this old friend that's your best friend from long ago, suddenly shows up, and oh no, we're supposed to believe that Hush is someone other than this guy that just showed up out of nowhere.
Would you believe I didn't know much about Hush other than the fact that he was and also wasn't Jason Todd? They've now actually gone back and retconned the fact that Jason Todd was Jason Todd, but it wasn't Jason Todd when he was Jason Todd. But
Hush was never Jason Todd. It was always that doctor friend that saved Bruce from certain death.
But the moment where he puts on the mask and pretends to be Jason Todd, that's actually now the real Jason Todd pretending to be Hush.
If people want to go and see, they did an animated Under the Red Hood, I believe, is the animated version of that. It's okay. DC Animated has more hits than misses, but some of them are definite misses.
They've been showing up on cable lately, and I got to tell you,
you should watch them. They're pretty good.
I have been, and I don't necessarily agree with you that they have more hits than misses. But once again, none of that has anything to do with Amazing Spider-Man Volume 7, number 1, which is a 4-slice of meatloaf affair. I kind of like what we're getting here.
What are they going to do when Amazing Spider-Man is going to hit Volume 11?
I don't know. What are they going to do?
I don't know. That's what I'm curious about, because the joke is just sitting there waiting. Maybe they should do a whole 12 or 15 issues or whatever, 28 issues of audio-based villains that Spider-Man is constantly, or maybe Spider-Man goes deaf. That would be interesting.
Turn it up to 11. Well, Spider-Man's already got a couple of
volume to 11. Volume 11. That's what I'm saying. They should lean into this. They should lean into this and have fun with Volume 11. It's a joke that is going to be so over so many people's heads. You get Dan Slott in there to write really good audio-based villains for Spider-Man to take on. And Spider-Man goes deaf on the 11th issue of Volume 11.
I feel like Volume 8 of Spider-Man might be more meaningful for like a spider, but everybody's got their thing.
Oh, got to turn it up to 11. And then, he loses his hearing on issue 11, and then he like grows 8 other ears instead of, 4 other arms and 6 other ears, I guess it would be, not 8. But.
6, yeah. 10 ears would make him a squid.
Yeah. See how that works, ladies and gentlemen? This is like Marvel. Call me. I've got so many great ideas like this that you guys are just
Marvel.
You can just
call him. Stop him. Please.
Yes. Pay me off. Pay me off now. Pay me off now, Marvel, before I take your company to the stratosphere. Hey, speaking of the stratosphere, I am a big fan of the Hellboy. I'm a big fan of the Mike Mignola. But Mike Mignola does not always write all the Hellboys or art all the Hellboy stories that are coming out. In fact, I don't think he has time because Dark Horse continues to crank out stories set in the Hellboy universe. So one of the ordained writers of the Hellboy universe is Chris Roberson. A big fan of his stuff. He's been on the show multiple times. He's a really good guy, and he has been writing a lot of all of Hellboy is supernatural, but when you get into the magic-y, witchy, 1800s type, Golden Dawn type stuff, he's been writing a lot of that. Chris Roberson's latest adventure with characters from the BPRD is Shadow of the Golden Crane, which sounds very pulpy, even though it takes place in modern day ... And providing the art is Michael Avon Oeming, who, again, I like his stuff all the way back from Powers and probably before, but Powers is where I really noticed his work. And these two have teamed up to tell these tales of Agent Zhang as she is traveling around trying to solve these hauntings. And I haven't read the previous two. I think the previous two have been reviewed up on the Major Spoilers website. At least the first one has. Jonathan Cadote has reviewed, I know, the first one. And the stories present themselves as somewhat of an anthology. So I was able to kind of figure out what's going on in this story without really knowing what the whole setup and payoff is going to be. This is only a 4-issue miniseries anyway. But here, Agent Zhang is visiting a haunting in an herbalist shop, Asian Chinese herbalist shop. And there's this ghost that's floating around. And as she touches a vessel that once housed this creature, she has a flashback to ancient China, where there are 3 women who are members of the Golden Crane working undercover inside the Imperial Palace, and they are trying to capture this ghost. And we get to see their story play out. So the Agent Zhang stuff is taking place as the bookends of the story, but the crux of the story are these 3 witches, essentially, who are trying to capture this ghost in ancient China. It's a fun little story. It's really well done, both from the story and from the art perspective. But then as the issue ends, Zhang is like, oh, I know what all this means. I need to go find Hellboy, which then is the doorway to chapter 4, where all these little stories come together into something bigger. That's my guess. But I still had fun just reading this individual issue. So I like Chris Roberson's work. I think he does a fine job. I like Michael Avon Oeming's work. I think he does a fine job. The only thing, if I were to critique, and this is a style thing for Oeming, he likes a lot of space. And so sometimes when I'm reading stuff that he has arted, not stuff that he's written and illustrated, but the stuff that he's doing the artwork on, a lot of times it feels like the panels are too open. Like I kind of want the quote unquote camera to tighten up a little bit. Or to just move slightly so the framing is just a little different so it doesn't feel so open and empty in spaces. That's my biggest critique, is that sometimes there's too much space in the panel. Other than that, really enjoy this comic. It is out this week from Dark Horse Comics. I enjoyed it. I really did. I kind of definitely want to go and pick up the previous 2 issues, and I want to read issue number 4 when it drops next month in May, because that's the month that follows this one. Hello, future people. Because I know all of you don't listen to this show on the day it's released, even though we've poured our blood, sweat, and tears and thoughts on Andrew Garfield into the show. Some of you are not here on the day to experience the love and the joy that is whatever that Spider-Man movie series was.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yes, just like Amazing Spider-Man '1, which came out last week from Marvel Comics. That is a $5.99 book. The Shadow of the Golden Crane is a $4.99 book. $5.99 for the Amazing Spider-Man. Is that because of John Romita or because of Junior or because of the page count?
I think because of the page count. Although next month it may be $5.99 again. We'll have to watch and see.
Yeah. Again, 4 slices of meatloaf out of 5 for Shadow of the Golden Crane. If you're a Hellboy BPRD fan, you definitely want to pick this up. I really like how they're finding places to slot these little stories and adventures into, which are, you've got thousands of years of history that you can play with. and being able to slot things in between these adventures and still have everything make sense if you were to read them in the chronological in-universe release. I like that a lot. I really do. I like when we get, other stories that are technically set in the BPR, in the Hellboy universe, that sometimes have nothing to do with what's going on with Hellboy. And we get very interesting stories, very interesting characters. And I think people will enjoy this as well. I am going to give a little teaser for a book that I got in this week. It doesn't come out until July of this year. Mm-hmm. It is from NBM Graphic Novels, and it is called Will Eisner, a comics biography by Stephen Weiner and Dave Mazur. And it is a comic book biography of the legend Will Eisner himself. I enjoyed this book. I read this last week when it came in, and I've thought about it every day since. Maybe because it's sitting right here on the desk next to me, but it is thought-provoking. It makes you, number one, appreciate Will Eisner a lot more. It makes you realize where he is in place of comics history, what he was doing when Superman first appeared on comics, his thoughts on Superman, what happened when he met Dennis Kitchen for the first time. How was the spirit revived thanks to Kitchen Sink Press? All of those things are in this book. I think it is a book worth reading. It's like $30. Like I said, it comes out in July. I'll probably have a more formal review as we get closer to that release. But I'm curious, Matthew, what do you think of biographies? I mean, I've already shared my thoughts on biographies before. Instead of a biography, we should call them biopics, because the optics on how you present somebody can be somewhat misleading. Because obviously, hey, we're talking about, Two Live Crew, or we're talking about Tupac, or we're talking about Will Eisner, or we're talking about Thomas Jefferson. We want to paint all these people in the best light possible, especially if their estate is still around and can sue us. And so oftentimes when you go and see the movie based on this person, it seems to be very, well, obviously there's bias in it. But does that bother you or not? I'm curious.
I feel like to some degree it's kind of baked in to any type of, even autobiography has its own bias, but I feel like it's kind of baked in, and you have to, like, for instance, there's a Sandra Bullock movie, which I think it's The Blind Spot, which is supposedly based on a true story. But anybody will tell you that the based on a true story is very, very tenuous. And even the story, the person upon whom the character is based, says this movie has nothing to do with me or my life.
Yeah.
But people still say it's an inspiring movie. I feel like it's hard to get away from that, especially when you realize that, your writer, your director, you have producers, you have a lot of people who have input into a modern kind of movie. I feel like at this point, it's hard to get away from that, even when you go back to like F for Fake. If you look at, the way that Wells actually presents Elmer Dory, and it's like, here's this guy he's basically just a nice guy, but he's also, an art forger.
Or is he?
Well, I think he is. But you have to take these.
But that's not a biography though. That's an intentional. It's not even a documentary. It is a it's not even a mockumentary. I use it in class as a documentary example, but it's more akin to what you see as a modern day YouTube essay video, which is a documentary. But that's a little bit different than doing a biography. Let me tell you the story of Matthew. Matthew grew up as a terrible, terrible person. Everything Matthew did is terrible. And people would say, oh, okay, that must be the true story because this person has written it down and is telling it. And then people would be like, wait, we know the real story. And it's not all that. There's things that other people need to know about this that aren't included in there. Therefore, this is flawed. And I will say, going back to this Will Eisner a comics biography is, I don't know what kind of a person Will Eisner was. He could have been the nicest person on the planet, the greatest, most benevolent person that you ever met in your life.
Right.
And this is the way this book comes out. But I'm going to bet that he's done some things that are probably not good. I'm going to bet, even though he was a big proponent of creator rights, that there's something that he regrets doing to people that are probably looked at today not right. But there's a couple of characters, I shouldn't say characters, there are a couple of people presented in this book that are just like, wow, this person is just horrible. Look at the way this person is portrayed in this book. Is that really the way that this person was? And the answer might be, well, not quite, but we needed to portray this person this way in order to really drive home what was making Will Eisner become the man that he became. Right. And then at that point, you're like, okay, but that's missing something. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening in here, but there are moments in here where it's like, oh, there's nothing but glowing things. Sure, Will Eisner made some mistakes. But on the surface, it's like, Will Eisner, the greatest person ever. The end.
And I feel like we also do bring our own baggage to it. So, if you go in, like, for instance, when a few years ago, there was something going around, it was the oral history of the Marvel Universe. And I've seen the back and forth between Stan was a genius and Jack was riding his coattails, to Jack was a genius and Stan was using him, and back and forth. And I feel like the truth kind of lies somewhere in between. But we get to the point where that oral history came out, and some of the stories that I was hearing in that counteracted stories that I'd heard for years. And so my first thought was, wait, no, it is the children who are wrong. But then I actually, as I was going through there, I'm like, okay, I can definitely see this is the perspective of that person. And I think to some degree, even something like Amadeus. Amadeus is like,
that's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a significant story. They took liberties.
But it's also not the problem with that is it's also not meant to be a biography, right? It's not like this is the true story. This is definitely a fictionalized version of the conflict between Salieri and Amadeus. So that it doesn't even that itself doesn't even count, because it's right up front. We know it's fictionalized. I guess the one that I have the biggest problem with, and why I really got on this kick, was when we saw, was it NWO, that biography movie? I think that's what it was. And I was just like, oh no, they're literally lying up. Yeah, straight out of Compton. They're literally misrepresenting many of these people who are no longer with us to make the people who are still living look good. And that's the point where I was like, oh no, people are just super biased, or, money changing hands or whatever. I'm not saying, again, on this Will Eisner one, but I approach anything with the words biography in them, or autobiography, with a lot of my stink detector is registered up to 11 at this point, going in, just because I'm waiting for the colorful retelling of history, much like what is going on in Washington these days, to appear. So I don't know. Dear listener, what do you guys think? Head over to the Major Spoilers Discord. Share your thoughts on bio comics, bio movies, bio TV series, BioWare. If you don't like that game company anymore, go ahead and share it over there in the Major Spoilers Discord server that you can join absolutely free.
In this economy?
That's right, Matthew. In this economy, we are letting people access the Major Spoilers Discord absolutely free.
That's almost nothing.
Almost. But listen, I know people are going to feel guilty. Oh man, I'm listening to this show for free. I'm joining the Major Spoilers Discord server for free. What if I want to give back this colorful insight that these two colorful characters are portraying on the show this week? I would like to thank them for their efforts. Internet smells efforts, and I want to thank them for it. How do I do that? Well, you get up onto your computer or your phone. Well, actually, don't use your mobile device, because there's surcharges when you use your mobile devices. that's an Apple tax, especially if you have an iPhone. But then again, who doesn't have an iPhone? But I would prefer you go to your desktop and go to patreon.com/major spoilers and sign up for the $5 a month. It's the silver level membership, $60 a year. In fact, it's a little bit cheaper than $60 a year because we do buy 10 or buy 11, get one free, or buy 10, get two free. I forget how it goes. But it's certainly no tariff applied onto our Patreon. We're keeping the prices low. We're keeping the prices the same. I know that there's other people that use Patreon that are like, well, I guess we're going to have to raise our prices because of X. We're not doing that. We're keeping them the same. And so for just $5 a month, you can support this show and all the shows in the Major Spoilers Podcast Network, and you'd get your name shouted out in this spot right here.
Right here.
But see, we didn't shout anybody's names out because we got no new patrons this week.
Wow.
Sad Hulk music as we go walking off into the rain. And this commercial. Oh, Matthew, WrestleMania 41.
Oh, yeah.
I mentioned WrestleMania. So I was in front of my students the other day and we were talking about sports and things that were going on. They're like, oh, did you see this thing? Did you see this thing? I was like, yeah. And WrestleMania is this weekend. And they all kind of stopped and laughed like, nobody watches wrestling, old man. I don't think any of them watch wrestling. I seriously don't think they do. Oh, well, sure. They'll watch a crappy B movie from 1952. But the whole thing between John Cena and Hayden Christian Church or Hayden Church, whatever his name is, that's happening on the big screen or your small screen, depending on what size of television you buy. By the way, somebody asked, Stephen, what's the size of the television? It's the break even is the 57-inch. That's where the price jumps from when you go above 57. That's when the price gets really expensive very quickly. What does that mean, Matthew asked? It's on the Discord. Go find out on the Discord.
Yeah.
But anyway, I like that I have been trying to open the door into Matthew's interests by when WrestleMania comes around, that we do a wrestling comic book.
I noticed this year can't tell the difference between various Super Sentai, though.
Yeah, but that's okay. Nobody cares. There's a red one and a blue one and a pink one and a purple one, and they're all wrapped in ticky tack, and they all look just the same. But this week we are looking at I Heart Skull Crusher.
Skull Crusher.
From Jose Campbell and Alicio Zono. Mm-hmm. And it is takes place in the future, post-apocalyptic future, where wrestling is not only the pastime, it's the required pastime. And everybody loves the number one hero, Skull Crusher. She is ready to kick everybody's butt in the game called Screaming Paintball, which is very much like wrestling meets Harry Potter.
Wrestling meets Calvin Ball meets Drifters.
Yeah.
I think it's Josie Campbell,
Rollerball.
isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know. Rollerball. If it's Josie Campbell, I apologize. Jose Campbell, I apologize.
No. But so we're talking rollerball. Is it James Caan rollerball or is it Chris Klein rollerball? Because I feel like one is demonstrably.
If you do a search on Google, both pictures will come up right next to a picture of Hayden Christensen. So anyway, in I Heart Skull Crusher, we are introduced to teenage Trini. This is very much in a hyper manga style that I like. And she's grown up without parents. They're dead in a society where water is used as the monetary exchange unit. And her greatest hope and dream in the world is not to have friends, not to have parents, not to be able to afford a place to live. She wants to be a screaming paintball player. And she wants to meet, I think she's secretly in love with,
absolutely,
Skull Crusher. Like, I mean, love with, not like a infatuation with.
She imagines herself marrying Skull Crusher more than once.
Yes. But the only way that she is going to become a screaming paintball champion is if she finds a team and enter Queen Mob's deadly tournament. And so over the course of 6 issues in this first volume, we get to see young Trini. Also happens to be a Power Rangers character name, Matthew.
That's true. Yeah.
See? Also, Alicio Zono has arted up the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic book. So see, I'm hitting 2 for 1 for you this week, Matthew. So she and her friends, she gathers up a team, and they find out that it's not being a paintball champion. It's the family you make along the way as they beat all the bad guys until they become the winners of the game, and they get to join. Well, wait. Trini gets to join Skull Crusher's team, but there's a catch, a monkey paws catch at the end of this book.
There always is. There always is. And honestly, the monkey paw is actually, honestly, I feel like it's a really, really good one. A lot of times
I like that. I did like the reveal.
Yeah. When you have that thing where you're like, oh, you got exactly what you wanted, it just turns out you didn't know what you wanted. But yes, all of her friends, poor friends, are everywhere. And
one of their teammates is a bear.
That's true.
No, I'm sorry. It's a mutant that simply looks like a bear.
At a certain point, you have to ask yourself, what's the difference? If you're a mutant who looks like a bear, or if you're a bear.
Because apparently mutants don't get to play in paintball. I forget how it works. There are a lot of different rules that pop up throughout this thing. But I will say that it says here that it collects Skull Crusher 1 through 5. I could have swore I read the first 6 issues that got to the big reveal, but maybe it was only the first 5. Only thing I know is this story moves fast. Like, there is no time for in-depth character development. There is a little will they, won't they type moments in the piece, but there's zany characters. There are supervillains. There are backstabbings. And this thing just starts out. Hi, I'm Trini. I want to be a screaming paintball champion. And I want to marry Skull Crusher. And then boom, hey, you're the champion. And she's like, ah. And then, and it reads that quickly.
It does. And I actually kind of like that. I think that is, you mentioned the manga influence. To some degree, I think that's part of the way manga traditionally kind of does book it. If you read the first few volumes.
I've tried to read My Hero Academia and One Piece, and those things drag.
My Hero Academia is a really bad example. But like, if you go back and you read like your Dragon Ball GTs, or you're reading some of these
early stuff.
Here's a bad guy. Here's another bad guy. Here's another bad guy. Recently, I reread Mazinger Angels.
Yeah.
Which is the story of pretty girls who have giant robots, and the giant robots are also pretty girls. That book's just bam, bam, bam. And that's kind of the feeling that I get from this, especially when I think we go a good 3 issues before actually Skull Crusher makes her appearance. And she's the title character, sort of. I guess technically not, because the title character is so that makes Trini the title character. But when you go through, and this is a story about a game that is just utter chaos.
Oh, it's a game where you get points for murdering people. So for teammates to survive is a big deal.
Right. You get 3 points for murder, but you lose a point if you murder somebody who doesn't have the ball. And if they do have the ball, they have to have it in their left hand on St. Swithin's Day, or else.
And there's
Calvin
also something about you get no points if you kill your own team members. Maybe I forget how that works too, because that's a major plot point in this story, right?
Right.
As we find out what made Skull Crusher the champion is that she was the last member of her team standing, because she killed everybody else.
Right. Which you almost can't blame her.
I mean, you don't, especially with Queen Mob and her sycophant son, ?
Marvin Mob.
Yeah, whatever his name is that's running around.
He sucks. He's just terrible.
Here's the thing. If you're a fan of sports manga, if you're a fan of high-octane action, if you're a fan of, and I quote the solicitation, if you're a fan of the funniest, queerest, craziest, bloodiest underdog tale of all time, you probably are going to like this book just from the story perspective alone. The biggest drawback, I think, for me, not a lot of character development. I mean, poor Trini spends most of the issue when she's talking to the skulls of her dead parents.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of makes her a Pokemon character like Cubone or something like that.
Actually, she might be the equivalent of a trainer, because as you go through this, you see her interacting with the characters. And I do love the fact that when characters are introduced, they're introduced with their own trading card.
Oh yeah, I like that too. I like that a lot.
She meets her coach, and his current status is attack 0, defense 0, drunk 2,500.
Yeah.
He broke the record. He hasn't washed himself in 3 months. So it really is kind of a neat take on the whole, I'm going to be the very best thing that you'll see in so many stories, but it also does feel weirdly, I don't want to say American, but it feels very Western. It feels like something that would come out of someone going, okay, how can I take this and how can I look at, like most of this takes place in the American Southwest, which part of it is irradiated. That's fine. I actually accidentally read the first 7 issues because I was just like, oh.
Yeah, I had them all. I had all of them that Boom had sent to us, and I just threw them all in a folder because I thought it was going to be a 12-issue run. And then I realized, oh no, this only collects the first 5 or 6 issues. So we've got 2 extras to read. So yeah, I didn't read those extras.
Well,
I got to the big point, and I was like, nope, I'm done.
Coming.
Yeah. In fact, it is. They have other stuff out right now.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Issue 8 is supposed to come out in 2005, but as you know, as I go through this, I feel like that speed, that not letting up, that every issue has the big fight scene, and it has the moment where, oh, here's this new character. Look how awesome they are at combat. Oh, but I will always protect my friends.
There's a lot of that in there. Yes.
Yeah, it has that kind of the pacing where you're like, boom, boom, boom. So when you do have the character moments, they're kind of, I don't want to say subsumed, but they're kind of in there, and it's just like, boom, take it. You get it, or don't. It's fine. There's chocolate in your mint, and if you don't eat the chocolate, then you can't have your meat.
Yeah, that's what I said about there's not a lot of time for the character development, but there is a lot of heart with the characters, especially the Trini character. I like a lot because she does have a lot of heart. You do feel for her, even though she may be not all there. But what do you expect in a post-apocalyptic America where mutants exist and murder ball is the pastime, right?
The national pastime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, a 16-year-old girl from the irradiated wastelands is actually considered to be a strong contender to be murdered on national
What's their name of their team? Like Podunk? I forget what the name of their team is. She actually goes to register, and they're like, where are you from?
Podunk,
we're from a little Podunk
team.
Yeah. We're a Podunk little team. And they're like, okay, Podunk little team, you're going to go up against this. And she's like, no. And it's like, too late. It'll cost you 50 gallons of water.
Town masks.
Yeah. Okay,
and
so Joseph Campbell, I think did a great job writing. As I was looking at, how was I calling it? Jose is because somebody, me, forgot to type the I in there in the name, so has been corrected. That's why
your left hand is fired.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's an aging keyboard. I no longer have the S, the D, the C, or the A key. They've all been rubbed off because they've been used so much. The keys are still there, but the printing has been rubbed off the keyboard. So, and I is on your right hand, by the way. So, but
not
I think
the way I type.
Well, go back and listen to the pre-show, ladies and gentlemen.
Keep in mind, I have partial use of my hand. Thank you very much.
Let's talk about the art.
I love the art. I love the fact
if you like the fast
references.
pace.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. The references to what?
There are references to characters not just from manga, but characters from there's a character in here where you're just like, that's a guy from Doctor Who. But there's someone in here who every time I see him, I'm like, is it All Might, or are they both referencing the same
Oh, yeah.
character even earlier with the same face? I don't know.
It might,
But it feels
but
like it's making references that even I don't get.
if you like the fast-paced storytelling, the art is just as fast. Not that it's drawn fast and is sloppy. I mean, there is so much action in all of the characters' actions. One of the things that we have talked about, a disappointment when it comes to some artists, is their inability to have characters, especially like cartoony characters like what we see in our I Heart Skull Crusher, or superheroes, where you kind of need to go to extreme poses to really make the action look good. And so oftentimes everything looks kind of slow or captured at the wrong time. But this is like all of the action is extreme. There is not a moment where it looks like any character is stiff or wooden. Every moment, even when we meet Skull Crusher and she's sitting in the shadows of this chair, there is movement in that frame. And it just comes across to how fast, how crazy this is. Again, if you've read manga and you know some of the tropey elements that happen as far as characters' facial expressions and those kinds of things, you're going to find some of that in here. And I just think that the action is so well done for a crazy comic like this.
Yes, and I think that we've said manga influence. I think more honestly, this may be anime influence because.
Or I was going to say, what's the Korean manga
Manhwa?
called? Yeah. Maybe it's more like that.
It could be because you'll have the moments where we talk about, hey, somebody gets introduced and boom, they're in motion. Or there's a moment where they're in the middle of a fight and it could just be, a kick, but it is this foreshortened foot with, speed lines. It looks like she's moving towards you and you can see almost the point where the video would freeze and then she'd still be there moving very slowly. And then you do a Zack Snyder slow, fast, slow. Then she'd kick somebody so hard their brain explodes. There's so much movement and so much personality in all the characters that you almost do forget, hey, what do I actually know about this person?
Yeah, and so that is
at the end of issue 4, Skull Crusher appears on, in real life on panel for the first time. And that page is so freaking cool. I love it.
So go back to the part where you said sometimes you're like, what's going on? There are a couple of moments where I felt like I missed something. Like when the twins, we find out that their daggers or their needles or whatever contain the antidote to the one mutant strain that they're flooding the arena with. It's like, wait, where was the part that they figured this out? And then so you just kind of have to roll with it, but it just feels like, wait, I missed something. And I'm going to have to go back and find that one particular panel again where it's either discussed or shown or whatever. And that might be my only odd complaint, is because it's moving so fast, you as a reader don't feel like you have time to stop and slow down and go back, because you want to read this at the same pace that it's being presented, which is breakneck speed, if that makes sense. Do you ever read a comic like that, Matthew, where it's like trying to move you through so fast, or the pace is so fast that you're reading it that way, and then you get to the end and you're like, whew, I'm kind of exhausted?
There are points in the story where things are happening so fast and so, just boom, 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 boom. I agree with you. Sometimes I actually have to stop, think about it.
And hammer
then,
time?
yeah, well, I also do. Well, Skull Crusher does have a hammer. I usually, for a review, will read any given book 2 to 3 times, because I'll make my initial pass and feel like, oh, here's the things that stick out. And then I'll try and read it for comprehension. And then I'll go back through and see if I missed anything cool. And the thing about that third pass for me this time was I did notice a lot of things, but I'm like, oh, did I even catch this the first time? Because the narrative is moving with such speed. this is an example of a book that I think I'd be happy reading an issue at a time, a month at a time, just because, yeah, boom.
I don't know. I don't know if I would want to read this monthly, just because it moves so fast that when I get to the end, even if I go back and reread it, even if I force myself to read it, like, hey, of the next 45 minutes, you're going to read this 28-page comic, and you're going to spend that entire time reading this comic. I think I would still get to the end and go, okay, great. Where's the next issue? Because I need this in me right now. Inject it into my veins. I don't like, I was going to ask you earlier when we were talking about Spider-Man. Remember when Marvel made the decision that Spider-Man was going to come out 3 times a month?
Yes.
And how people were like, that's crazy. You'll never be able to keep it up. And they're like, no, we'll totally be able to do this. And then they didn't. Yeah. That's kind of the way I would feel if I had to read this an issue at a time. And especially when there's a big break between issues 7 and 8. 8 came out just last month, March 25th. I would be like, where's my next issue? I need it. I need it. I need it. I need it. I would be just like Trini trying to get a coach or trying to find a team. You need to be on my team because this is going to be so great. And it would be just super frustrating for me that I wouldn't be able to find the next bit. And I know people are, we have lives. There are demands on the industry. There are, costs that have to be covered. I certainly don't want Josie Campbell or Alicio Zono to kill themselves at the artboard or in front of the computer typing this stuff out. But if there is any series that we have read recently that is not manga, that I feel should go onto that manga, hey, there's a new issue every day. Or, when you read this Will Eisner comics biography and they talk about having to create the Spirit magazine as the newspaper insert every week and having to do 8 pages of original comics every week. That's kind of what I want from I Heart Skull Crusher. But without all the pain and the stress that comes onto the creators from that, right?
Right. And I think that's another one of those moments where you want this vision. You want these creators doing this stuff, but how long does that take? How far ahead were they in those first 5 issues? And that break between 7 and 8, was it so that we can get monthly or bi-monthly or something for the second half of that big first arc? I don't know. That's, the big argument that you have to have in terms of, I want more of this right now. But part of the reason that you enjoy it is because it's not something that is being delivered in a way that, is fast food comics, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Everybody loves a Big Mac, but a Big Mac isn't necessarily as good as I Heart Skull Crusher, which maybe, I don't know. It's like Indian food that you can get from the one place.
No, here's my big concern, though. And I'm not saying that this is the fault of this particular comic. I'm just talking about comics that we want and we have to wait a month or 2 months or 3 months. What's the Saga is a good example of this, right? Where people are just like, I need Saga, but it's like, no, we're gonna have to wait 6 months so we can get the next issue out to you guys. With I Heart Skull Crusher, it is such a fast read and it is such a fun read that I think I would get through it. And this is a potential. I'm not saying this is something that is going to happen. But I get through it and I set it aside and said, wow, that was fun. Is there another issue? No, it'll come out in a month. Okay. And unless you have a pull list or unless you have gone over to Comixology/Amazon and said, hey, subscribe to this so that it's delivered to me when the next issue comes out, there's a very good chance that very fast read media like this, I just might forget about when next month rolls around. If it's not on my radar that, oh, hey, this is the week that the new issue of I Heart Skull Crusher comes out, I might completely forget about it. And then that means lost sales and that means, other issues. And so that's something that I worry about with really good comics that, in my opinion, read very fast. Not because they're bad, but because they are that good.
Agreed. Actually, that is a really, really valid point because you do have that moment of, these are really, really exciting stories, but they also read quick. And, My first pass through all 7 issues and not just the 5, that was half an hour,
Yeah.
35
45 minutes, 45 minutes easy.
Really, really quick stuff. So I can definitely see that. I don't know. Maybe you should like set yourself an alarm.
No,
Like,
I mean,
hey,
well, but see,
go.
that's the problem too, right? Does it come out in the 4th week? Does it come out every 4 weeks? Well, what about a month where there's 5 weeks? Does that mean on the month that there's a 5th month after that it would come out on week 3? When is this thing going to come out? And that's just a publishing issue. Again, that's why I said, remember when Spider-Man used to be weekly, or at least 3 times a month? You could go to the store every week and know that there was a new Spider-Man on the shelf. I can go to a comic book store knowing that, Bone, pick your favorite comic, whatever. There is probably a time for many of our listeners that you went into that comic shop going, hey, I think this is the week where the next issue of my favorite comic book arrives. And you get in there and they're like, oh no, that's next week, or that's 2 weeks from now, or there's a delay and it's not going to be here next month. And so then you're like, well, okay, let me find something else. And then you go in and you forget to ask about the comic because it has slipped off your radar in the 3 extra weeks or extra month or whatever. And so unless the PR department of the publisher is really cranking things out, then those comics run the risk of getting lost. There are many, many reasons why comic books get delayed. There are many, many reasons why a comic book falls behind schedule, or why a publisher decides to delay a shipment on something.
Mhm.
Could be a price increase thanks to stupid tariffs.
Right.
But that's a real problem. And again, I don't want to keep harping on this, but I think some books would read better as an OGN. And I think I Heart Skull Crusher would be better as, give me them 5 issues right now in an OGN. It's going to have a longer shelf life. And if I know in 6 months, 6 through 10 is coming out, or, 8 months, 6 through 10 is coming out, that's going to be a little bit easier for me to digest. Now, the drawback of that is most people aren't going to pay attention to the volume 1. They'll only start paying attention when they see like 5 volumes on the shelf. And they're like, what's this thing? It's got 5 volumes. It must have some staying power. It must be good. And then they pick it up and read it. And then everything catches on. That's the downside of that. But I think I'd rather read this as a collection than a single issue.
See, I think I would rather read the single issue. I feel like the pacing for me feels like a single issue. Yes, it would read quick, but it would also read really well. So
yeah,
I honestly, if we have this kind of argument about a book to where it's good enough that you want more of it right now, and I want more of it, but I also want it to be the best it can be, I feel like if that's the worst thing we can say about it, hey, this is probably a pretty good, solid story.
Here, let's see if we can figure out why this is. Matthew, this is no comment on you and your health, but as a kid,
how dare
no, hold on, follow me. As a kid, did you have access to candy and sweets whenever you wanted them? Like if you wanted a candy bar, could you just go down to the store and get a candy bar if you wanted one?
Not until high school.
Okay, but in high school it was pretty much whatever, right?
Yeah, once I had my bike, or once I had my own truck, yeah, I could go.
Okay.
I wasn't necessarily a candy bar guy. I was like, hey,
well,
man.
or sweets, whatever sweets are. Were sweets readily available to you growing up? Like candy, cookies, that kind of stuff.
After the age of 12, yes.
Okay. So for me,
going somewhere with this counsel.
Yeah. For me, I was not. We only had cakes on special occasions. We didn't get candy just to have a candy bar because we went to the grocery store. Candy was this like luxury item. So when I had my own money and I was like, you mean I can just buy a candy bar anytime I want?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, give me them candy bars. Nom, 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 right? Because that was something that was denied to me younger. You, on the other hand, probably had, and again, not a comment on you, but you probably had access to more of that stuff as a younger child, so that when you're older, you're like, yeah, it's a candy bar. I can have a candy bar whenever I want, but it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So in this case, I want more of I Heart Skull Crusher. In fact, I want little candies with hearts and skulls on them, sweet tarts, for Valentine's Day. I would get a whole handful of those things and I would just shove them all into my mouth at once because of that dopamine hit from something that was lacking as a child. You, on the other hand, would be, no, I'll just have one now. I'll have one a little bit later because I'm just saying, I would bet that there is some logic to this argument that I'm making about those of us who need to consume everything right away and very quickly, as opposed to those people who can step back and say, oh, no, I'm used to this. I'm going to pace myself on that. And I bet it goes back to things you might have been denied or given to as a child. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see it.
Some psychologist out there or some psychiatrist out there, write in and let us know if I'm onto something there or not. Because I'm very curious. I'm very curious about that. No, it is something that I'm very curious about because with my kids, I have taken the exact opposite approach that my parents did, right? So it's like, hey, you guys want a candy bar? Great. Here's a candy bar. To the point now where if you were to ask me as a kid, do you want a candy bar? Yes, please. Now it's like, hey, you guys want a candy bar? I'm okay. And I think that's a better attitude to have because you know that you've had access to that and you know what that candy does, as opposed to someone that's been denied it and then they create this instant gratification, must consume very fast thing. I'm saying this is more on me than it is you, right? And so I think my kids have kind of developed in that same way where, yes, there is a new video game that has come out, but if you don't get it right away and you don't play through it nonstop right away, that's okay. As opposed to, no, you were denied this thing for 4 years and now you get it. And so you must consume it quickly. Or in my case, a Snickers bar for 21 years of my life. I don't know. Went off on a tangent there, but hey, what do you expect on this show? I clarified that earlier.
Yeah,
you can fix this all, ladies and gentlemen. You can fix this all, ladies and gentlemen, right now by going to patreon.com/major spoilers and signing up for that silver level membership. Bottom line for me, Matthew, I like this book a lot. I think people would like even just this first arc, even if they never get to read the second arc in this collection. I think people will enjoy this for what exactly it is. Now, it does mean it's open-ended and you don't know what happens to Trini once she gets her heart's desire.
Right.
But I like this book. I think that this is a must-read recommendation. I think if you are a sports comic fan, which I'm not, I really just don't understand them that much. I mean, I understand the sport, but I just don't understand the appeal. I think you will enjoy this. If for Wrestlemania, if suddenly you decide that you can't afford the Peacock subscription because you'd rather give your money to major spoilers, then maybe use that extra money in addition that you would have spent for that, whatever the $19.99 a month that Peacock is charging you. You got the $5 to major spoilers and then the $14 or whatever to I Heart Skull Crusher. And you're going to have a much happier weekend watching than not watching WrestleMania and seeing what horrible things The Rock does to Hayden Christian Church. I know, right? You can't tell them apart. None of them. But this is a must read for me.
I'm just kind of, I'm still lost in your psychological analysis, but I will agree with you. This is a really likable book. And I regret one thing. I completely somehow conflated this with Skull Kickers.
Yeah. The fantasy book.
Yeah. So I thought this was a fantasy book about a dwarf and stuff. And I remember when we did Skull Kickers, and it's not necessarily my jam. So I never really thought that I Heart Skull Crusher would be anything that I'd be into. And once I started reading issue 1, I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I read this when it came out, 2-3 years ago? I am stupid. But, I have that argument a lot. So this is definitely a rush right out into buying frenzy for me, just because of the I don't want to say, what the heck? The uniqueness of what we're getting here. We're getting two creators working together on something that definitely has antecedents. It has references. It has influences, but it feels like something new. It feels like, if you were like Battle Royale.
Yeah, you got your Pokemon and my Murder Ball.
Exactly. Murder Ball is great. Everybody loves Murder Ball. You got your Chris Klein over here. Over here, you've got this cute girl who's in love with the world champion, who also happens to be a really cute girl. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, fine. Skull Crusher's going to kill me with a hammer. I'm sort of fine with that. But yeah, this is really good stuff.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are going to wrap it up this week. Thank you so much for checking us out. If you are Thomas Hayden Church or John Cena, and you would like to come on the show and argue how you are not the other person, just reach out. We will gladly have either John Cena or Thomas Hayden Church on the show. Hayden Christensen, if you want to come on the show too, that's fine. But I'd rather have Thomas Hayden Church and John Cena on right now, because so we can settle this dispute once and for all. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want more of this insanity, patreon.com/major spoilers. I suggest you sign up. And then next week, the zaniness is going to continue. Why? Because we're going to be taking a look at Plastic Man on the Lam, because we know that you love comics and we do too. And we will talk with you soon.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, he kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler! What a major spoiler! Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm stark raving rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast, being shot up in a fun, be in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2025 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.